I've been sleeping with my friend Maggie's husband, Mark, for 3 months now. Before you judge me, I want you to know that I have stopped. But the problem is that Maggie's husband is threatening to tell Maggie about it if we don't continue with the affair. He doesn't care for Maggie or the marriage, but Maggie loves him and he's her whole world. My name is Chris. I'm a professional photographer, mid-30s, living in a charming but slightly lonely brownstone in Boston. My life has always been about framing moments, capturing the perfect light, the authentic smile. Yet, my own life has been a blur of bad decisions and shadow. I met Maggie in college. She was the sunshine I desperately needed, the loyal, steadfast friend who never judged my messy past. I know, that makes what I did all the worse. I should have been protecting her happiness, not actively dismantling it, with the man who vowed to cherish her. The affair was a desperate mistake, a pathetic attempt to fill a void that only seemed to grow larger with every stolen hour with Mark. When I ended it, I thought I was taking the first step toward redemption. I was wrong. The nightmare had just begun. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It was a casual Tuesday afternoon, sunlight streaming onto the hardwood floor of my apartment, making the air feel deceptively calm. I was editing photos from a recent engagement shoot. Irony is a cruel thing. When the text came, it wasn't from Maggie, it was from Mark. A single chilling line. Meet me at the Old North End Cafe tomorrow at noon. If you don't show, your secret's out. My heart slammed against my ribs. A desperate bird trapped in a cage. I tried to call him back immediately, but he had already blocked my number. The adrenaline rush was instant, sickening. I reread the message, the words blurring on the screen. He wasn't just asking me to meet, he was issuing an ultimatum. He wanted the affair to continue. The casual way he threatened to shatter Maggie's world and mine told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he truly was. He wasn't a heartbroken husband. He was a cold, calculated predator. The 3 months of clandestine meetings, the whispered promises, the intense, illicit connection, it all evaporated, replaced by the bitter, metallic taste of fear and betrayal. The next day, I walked into the cafe with a sinking dread. Mark was already there, impeccably dressed, sipping an espresso, as if he were waiting for a stockbroker, not his mistress. His eyes, usually warm and seductive, were now flat, devoid of emotion. "You look pale, Chris," he noted, a smirk playing on his lips. "Didn't sleep well?" I slid into the chair opposite him, my hands trembling as I set my purse down. "What do you want, Mark? I told you, it's over. I can't do this to Maggie anymore." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper. "It's not over, Chris. Not for me. I've grown accustomed to our little escape. And since you seem to be having moral qualms now, I need some insurance. You stop seeing me, and Maggie gets an anonymous email with all the dates, times, and screenshots of our texts. Think she'll believe a denial then?" The sheer audacity of his blackmail stole my breath. This wasn't just about sex anymore. It was about power, control, and his complete disregard for the 2 women who were supposed to be the most important people in his life. I had played the game, and now I was trapped. I went home and collapsed onto my sofa, the horror of Mark's threat finally settling in. Maggie, sweet, loyal, trusting Maggie, she had just landed her dream job in interior design, and she was planning a surprise weekend getaway for Mark's birthday next month. Their kitchen counter was covered in fabric swatches and travel brochures. If she found out, it wouldn't just be her marriage that dissolved. It would be her. Maggie had always poured every ounce of her emotional energy into Mark. He was her anchor, her future, her entire identity. The thought of seeing the light drain from her eyes because of my mistake was a physical pain, a deep, sharp ache in my chest. I knew Mark was banking on my fear of hurting Maggie. He knew that for me, the betrayal of our friendship was far more agonizing than any self-reproach. He'd found the perfect leverage, my guilt. I felt the slow burn of anger start to replace the paralyzing fear. He had weaponized my worst mistake, and I was not going to let him win by simply submitting to his demands. A decision crystallized that evening. I would not continue the affair. I would not be his puppet, and I certainly would not subject Maggie to this man's cruel indifference any longer. But I couldn't just confess. Mark's threat was real, and the fallout would still destroy Maggie. The only way to truly win was to dismantle Mark's control, expose him for the vile narcissist he was, and somehow preserve Maddie's heart in the process. I needed to get ahead of him. I needed evidence, concrete, irrefutable proof that would not only confirm the affair, but also highlight his monstrous blackmail. I remembered the old burner phone Mark used only for our texts. He kept it hidden in his office, tucked inside an antique wooden camera case on the top shelf. Getting it would be the first and most dangerous step. It was a high-stakes gamble, but the alternative was a lifetime of his emotional tyranny. This wasn't about saving myself anymore. It was about saving my friend from a predator wearing the disguise of a devoted husband. My plan began to take shape with the cold precision of a military operation. I had to get into their house when Mark wasn't there. Maggie was scheduled to be at a design client meeting across town all day Saturday. Mark, typically, spent Saturday mornings at his golf club, a habit he never broke, even for me. I drove past their house late Friday night, the familiar cozy glow of their living room windows mocking my intentions. I felt a surge of nausea, knowing the depths of my deceit. On Saturday morning, I dressed in dark, comfortable clothing, parked my car 3 blocks away, and approached their side gate. Maggie, with her carefree trust, had given me a spare key years ago, just in case, she'd said. I slipped the key into the lock, the quiet click sounding like a thunderclap in the suburban stillness. The house smelled faintly of Maggie's favorite vanilla candles and Mark's expensive cologne. The guilt was suffocating, but I pushed it down, focusing on the goal, the camera case. Mark's office was on the 2nd floor. I moved through the house like a ghost, every creak in the floorboards amplifying my terror. I reached his office door and pushed it open. The room was sleek, modern, and intimidatingly tidy. I spotted the antique wooden camera case instantly, perched on the highest shelf of a built-in bookcase. I dragged a heavy, leather armchair over, climbed precariously onto the armrest, and reached up, my fingers brushing against the cool wood. Finally, I had it. I jumped down, heart pounding, and set the case on his mahogany desk. The old clasp was stiff, but I managed to pop it open. Inside, nestled beneath a velvet lining, was the small, black burner phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I powered it on. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, all of my recent desperate pleas, followed by Mark's cold, demanding threats, clearly outlining the blackmail. I quickly scrolled through and began taking high-resolution pictures of every single text conversation with my own phone. As I was midway through capturing the last crucial text detailing his demand to resume the affair, I heard it. The sound of a key turning in the front door lock, followed by the familiar, heavy thud of Mark's golf bag hitting the hall floor. Mark was home. My blood ran cold. He was never home before noon on a Saturday. Panic seized me. I quickly tucked the burner phone back into the camera case, snapped it shut, and shoved the armchair back into its original position, all in a matter of seconds. I scrambled to the office door, pressing myself against the wall, listening. Mark's voice boomed from the entryway. "Honey, I'm home early. Tournament got rained out." He was calling for Maggie. He couldn't know she was gone. I knew I couldn't risk leaving the office. He'd see me instantly. I had to hide. My eyes darted around the room, landing on a large floor-to-ceiling closet used for storing old business documents. I slipped into the document closet, pulling the heavy dark oak door shut, just as Mark's footsteps started up the stairs. The space was cramped, smelling of aged paper and dust. I held my breath, clutching my phone with the damning evidence. I heard Mark enter the office. The sound of him moving things on the desk made me wince, terrified he would notice the slightly askew camera case. He started talking on his main phone, his voice loud and irritated. "Yeah, the rain cost us the whole weekend. No, don't tell Maggie. She'd just fuss. Say, can you do me a favor? Check my email, the one I use for client work. I need to send a reminder to a certain contractor." He paused, and then I heard him chuckle, a dry, humorless sound. "Make sure you delete the sent item immediately. I don't want anyone seeing it. It's a very personal project." The term contractor was clearly code. Mark wasn't talking about business. He was talking about his plan to expose me. He was moving forward with the threat. Mark eventually left the office, heading downstairs, presumably to watch golf on TV. The silence that followed was deafening. I waited for what felt like an eternity, counting the steady ticks of his grandfather clock in the hallway. When I finally dared to emerge, my legs were weak and shaky. I tiptoed out of the office, down the stairs, and made it to the back door without a sound. Once outside, the fresh, crisp autumn air felt like a balm on my skin. I ran the 3 blocks back to my car, got inside, and drove away, not daring to look in my rearview mirror until I was several neighborhoods away. Back in the safety of my own apartment, I reviewed the photographs on my phone. They were perfect, clear, undeniable proof of Mark's affair, his burner phone usage, and the entire blackmail scheme. I had the smoking gun. But the question remained, how could I use this evidence to achieve the ultimate revenge without destroying Maggie? I knew the emotional impact would be devastating, but the betrayal had to land squarely on Mark, not on our friendship. I needed an ally, someone discreet, professional, and entirely removed from my social circle. I remembered an acquaintance from the photography community, a fierce, no-nonsense investigative journalist named Chris. She specialized in exposing high-profile community figures involved in scandals. I reached out to her, maintaining strict anonymity at first. "I have a story," I texted her, "about a prominent businessman's emotional blackmail and a year-long pattern of infidelity. I have irrefutable proof." The journalist, intrigued, agreed to meet me in a neutral location, a quiet, out-of-the-way park on the edge of the city. I showed her the texts, explaining the situation without revealing Maggie's name or my own deep involvement. I stressed one crucial condition. The story had to focus solely on Mark's manipulative behavior, his double life, and his misuse of power, minimizing any reference to his wife or the other woman. The journalist, whose name was Sarah, was ruthless and efficient. She understood the angle, the powerful man who betrays and blackmails. She didn't want a tawdry affair expose. She wanted a character takedown. Over the next week, she quietly verified Mark's professional status and connections, setting the stage for the public expose. Meanwhile, I had to keep up appearances with Maggie. We had coffee, talked about her new job, and she complained lightheartedly about Mark's recent moodiness. "He's just stressed about work, I guess," she'd sighed. Each conversation was torture. My mask of friendship felt heavy and suffocating. The need for the revenge to be swift and devastating grew with every loving word Maggie spoke about her unsuspecting husband. Mark, on the other hand, was texting me nonstop, demanding a meeting, his tone shifting from manipulative to aggressive. I ignored him, letting his anger simmer. I knew his escalating frustration would only make the fall harder. I needed a grand stage for the truth to be revealed, a moment that would maximize Mark's public humiliation. That stage was already set. Maggie's surprise party for Mark's 40th birthday. She had rented out the private back room of the city's most exclusive downtown restaurant, inviting all their friends, family, and Mark's most important business associates. It was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. I knew this was the moment. The journalist had finalized her article, a scathing, detailed piece, complete with the photographic evidence I'd provided. We planned the release. The moment Mark would be giving his heartfelt, lying speech about his wonderful wife and perfect life. The article, titled "The Double Life of a Boston Bigwig," would go live online at precisely 8:30 p.m., and print copies would be delivered to the restaurant within minutes. The night of the party arrived. Maggie looked radiant in a sapphire dress, her face glowing with love and anticipation as she greeted their guests. Mark, oblivious and arrogant, played the role of the devoted husband perfectly, his arm around Maggie, smiling for photos. I was there too, feeling like a ghost, a villain, and a reluctant executioner all at once. I kept my distance from Mark, offering only a tense, polite greeting. Around 8 p.m., Maggie tapped a glass, and the room quieted. "My love," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I just want to say how much I cherish you." She handed the microphone to Mark. He took a sip of his wine, cleared his throat, and began his performance. "To my beautiful wife, Maggie. She is the rock of my life, the purest, most loving soul." His words were saccharine and utterly fake. As Mark reached the crescendo of his speech, "And I look forward to many, many more perfect years with the only woman I will ever truly love," his words rang hollow in my ears. I didn't need a single notification. I could feel the electricity of the impending exposure in the room. I discreetly checked my phone. It was precisely 8:30 p.m. A single, urgent notification flashed. "Sarah, the journalist. It's live. Good luck." I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod toward the restaurant's entrance, where a young man in a hastily donned delivery uniform stood, clutching a large stack of folded newspapers. The timing was perfect, synchronized with Mark's final, hypocritical sentiment. Mark's speech ended to polite applause. But before the sound could die down, the waiter approached him with a silver serving tray. It wasn't the promised dessert. It was a copy of the Boston Ledger newspaper, folded open to a front-page article featuring a massive, unflattering photo of Mark taken from a public event. "Sir, I believe this was just delivered for you," the waiter stated with professional detachment. Mark frowned, utterly confused by the theatrical presentation, and took the paper. Simultaneously, the delivery guy and a few hired runners, positioned strategically near the exits, began distributing the papers to every table. A stunned hush fell over the room as Mark's family, his clients, and their closest friends began reading the damning headline, "The Double Life of a Boston Bigwig, Blackmail, Betrayal, and the Burner Phone." Bruh? The transformation on Mark's face was instantaneous and terrifying. It went from confused bewilderment to a sickly ashen gray as his eyes scanned the printed words. He recognized his own chilling texts, reproduced verbatim, detailing the blackmail and his cynical plans. And the realization of his complete ruin dawned. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles twitching. He crumpled the paper in his fist, as if trying to destroy the evidence through sheer force, and looked wildly around the room, a predator trapped. His panicked, desperate gaze eventually locked onto me, standing quietly by the bar. His expression was a volatile mixture of absolute fury and utter helplessness. He knew I was the orchestrator. He knew I had delivered the final fatal blow. Maggie, across the room, was slower to react. She had been too busy processing the sudden silence and the strange newspaper delivery. Sensing the toxic shift in the atmosphere, she picked up a paper left lying on a nearby chair. Her gasp was quiet, a tiny, strangled sound, but it pierced the stunned silence of the dining room. She didn't look at Mark. She only looked at the printed screenshots of his private messages, the casual cruelty of his demands, and the dates that overlapped perfectly with the weeks she'd spent pouring her heart into planning this very party. The guests started buzzing loudly. Phones came out as people frantically searched for the online article, Mark, consumed by rage, lunged toward me, knocking over his own champagne flute. "You witch, you set me up," he roared, his voice cracking. But before he could reach me, Maggie moved. She straightened, her body rigid, and turned, her eyes now devoid of tears, replaced by a cold, terrifying emptiness. Maggie didn't scream, didn't shatter, didn't give Mark the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she performed the final, most satisfying act of the revenge with an icy dignity that commanded the room. She looked first at Mark, her ex-husband-to-be, her gaze sweeping over his disgraced, sputtering form. Then she met my eyes for a fraction of a second, an acknowledgement I couldn't interpret, before slowly turning to face the stunned, silent crowd. She took a slow, deep breath, her hands steadying the crumpled newspaper. "No, Mark," she said, her voice clear, amplified by the silent room despite the slight tremor. "You set yourself up. I want every single person here to know that this is not an accusation. This is fact. The man standing here is a cheat, a liar, and a blackmailer." She then turned her back on him completely, facing the entirety of his business and social world. Strong, the party is over. You all know what kind of man my husband is. I'm going home to call my lawyer." She dropped the paper on the floor and walked past Mark, her spine straight, leaving him standing there alone, publicly exposed and absolutely defeated. Later that night, she called me. I answered, braced for the inevitable explosion of grief and rage. Instead, her voice was calm, almost weary. I read the whole article. "Chris, I saw how he blackmailed you. I know you were trying to protect me, even if you did it the wrong way first. Thank you for ending this. Thank you for saving me." The next morning, Mark woke up to an empty house, a divorce filing that would cripple him financially, and a professional life in ruins due to the immediate national scandal. As for me, the gnawing guilt began to lift, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of justice. My friend, though wounded, was finally free. The revenge was complete. I had lost my integrity for 3 months, but I had saved my friend for a lifetime and destroyed a truly cruel man. Click on the next story waiting for you on screen, because trust me, the betrayals only get darker from here.